Now calling to order our deliberation session, 6:30 on March 11th. Councilmember Stossberg, take it away. Oh, do we have to call roll again? Okay, clerk, will you please call the roll?
I'm here.
I think they're working. Here. Are these working now? You have to keep talking in them. Here.
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 Yep, I'm here.
Here.
If anybody's
But I'm
computer audio,
my audio is off.
oh, well.
My audio is off.
Wow.
One. Coming from somebody.
I don't. Is your computer audio on?
Are you the only one in the Zoom?
I'm not in this.
Oh, no, because
And I
we're
might-
going to be hearing the mic.
My mic is off.
Oh, it's the pro recorders.
Thank you. Councilmember Stossberg, take it away.
Sure, thank you. Is this on now? These microphones always make me a little crazy. Oh, I think it might be now. All right, so the purpose of this deliberation session is the development of 2027 shared budget priorities. And so what we're starting with is both the deliberation session that we had in December where we identified priorities, and then that survey that I got sent out to y'all in February. So thank you everybody for responding to that survey on time, which allowed me to compile results for fiscal committee meetings. So then at the fiscal committee meeting, we kind of reviewed the outcomes, reviewed the things that kind of floated to the top and how we could like sort those things out, talked it over with Controller McKim and Deputy Mayor Knapp. And one of the things that they said was it's not necessary to keep our priorities within buckets. And so then the top priorities draft that I put in the packet is not within buckets, but just as kind of, so each category in terms of results, so I think that the full results are in Appendix A. I made sure that the top things all were somehow included in the top priority list. And there are different numbers of tops in each of the bucket categories just because of how voting dribbled out. So it was this really kind of like fun / challenging thing for me to do after, discussing with the fiscal committee, like how to make this data make sense in any way. And so, for example, under the high-performing government outcomes, the top 3 voted on were implementation of existing plans, maintaining city assets, and developing city plans where none currently exist. And so all 3 of those end up in one way or another under our top priorities. The one that I'll maybe point out is making homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating, which came out as a top 3 in 2 different buckets. So that's kind of like consolidated, right? And then there are several things consolidated under there in terms of top priorities that all kind of connected in different ways with that bucket. So that, so overall, like this, I'm just trying to explain, I guess, really badly, this data that you got sent out, all of this information, because there was a lot of it, and how I kind of consolidated these top 13 priorities with help from fiscal committee. So like as fiscal committee chair, that was why this landed on my lap. But these are in no particular order. In fact, actually they are kind of in an order. They're in an order of how they were discussed. So the high-performing government ones are first, and then I think it was housing and homelessness, and then it went on down in terms of making sure that each of the top things found a place in this list in terms of what everybody was individually prioritizing. But it is not in a ranked list. It is not, this is definitely not me saying, oh, the number 1 council thing overall was implementing existing plans, because that's not necessarily accurate. We also can't just go on the number of points any one of those things achieved, because there were a different number of outcomes within each bucket. So it's like if we could only vote for 3 things, and there are 5 choices, well, then each one of those is going to have more points than if there were 10 choices. And so there's not really a good way to do this except by having a conversation about what people think. And so that is what we're supposed to do tonight. And so then things to keep in mind when considering this, and some of this was kind of said by Controller McKim and Deputy Mayor Knapp, things to keep in mind. Is this activity or outcome driven by local government? And if it's not, how can government support the activity is kind of the follow-up. Because if it's not driven by us, is there something that we want to do to support whoever is driving it? Is the outcome measurable? Is it something that we can actually measure? Is the funding allocation for that outcome measurable? Does the outcome require direct fiscal investment, staff time, or legislation in terms of kind of figuring out what kind of priority it might be? And then also, is it a priority for 2027? And if it's not, and so I'll pull out the Safe Streets for All kind of concept, because that was one of the top things, 0 traffic fatalities or serious injuries by 2039. Technically, next year is 2027, not 2039, but of course we need to be working toward that goal. So it's not necessarily a goal or priority for 2027, but how should that priority be reflected in the 2027 budget, right? When thinking about the multiple smaller type projects or initiatives that could move us toward that goal of 0 traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And then the last question, is this outcome personally important to you? Which, because the whole point of this is to be able to submit a ranked letter to the administration saying these are our top however many priorities in the order that we want them to be in. And I would like us to, largely agree with that order. And this is like the hard part, right? Because like a couple years ago when we did this, they were not in any particular order because we couldn't put them in any particular order. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe we can do better this year. So that was about the intro that I had. And so I guess, this is the time for feedback. Who wants to throw out any kind of comment? And also comments in terms of things that I left out of this, including things like low-hanging fruit that you might go, hey, nobody voted for this thing, but it's this legislative piece, or it's this thing that maybe we should throw up there as something important. And that's, Appendix C, I think, is things that I just kind of the fiscal committee decided if it got no votes, then we were just going to not worry about it when trying to consider how to order these things. Is that great? Councilmember, sorry.
Do you imagine that we would prioritize in buckets or individual things? So could you imagine that it would be item 3A is priority 1 and item 2C is priority 2 as a council? Or that we're saying we care most about, for example, housing is like thing 1, and then these are our top 3 within bucket 1?
I think my vision was to ignore buckets, because it felt like there were so many of the outcomes that crossed bucket lines. And part of that is because I think the nature of how we devise the outcomes, and we're like all novices at outcomes. And so it's like, well, what are outcomes actually? And also the overall discussion, like where does this outcome belong? And so housing and homelessness is a good one, because it literally was in, I think it was public safety and in housing. And you could say it belongs in both of those things in different ways, but like which bucket should we put it in the most? Like, I don't know. Deputy Mayor Knapp didn't seem like she didn't think that it mattered. So I don't think we need to worry about the buckets. Councilmember Flaherty.
Councilmember, sorry, was your question a bit about what are the 13 top priorities though on pages 4 and 5, and basically ranking those 13? Right. As opposed to the 6 buckets of housing and homelessness, economic development, et cetera.
Well, I'm wondering whether there's some utility in us being able to say of the 6 buckets, this is our priority. This is how we Of those 6 things, these are all things we care about, but of those 6, this is the one we care about most of the 6 first, whether there's any utility in ranking those over ranking the 13. But I think that Councilmember Strasburg makes a good argument for it's just like, here are the 13 things that, that we really want to see and the reasons we want to see them there.
And I think that we could, I think we could start with the 13, and then depending on where our discussion goes and what y'all think about your priorities, then, I mean, maybe it will say, maybe things will float to the top that all do have to do with like housing, or do have to do with economic development, or do have to do with environment. And so maybe this is a both and. But we have to start in one or the other. So let's start with the 13.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Councilmember Zulik, what's most important to you?
Thank you. What is most important to me is that making sure that all of our residents have their basic needs met. And so when we sort these, I think we should be thinking about which one of these things provides food, shelter, water, and safety towards people. And that is how I've been framing it, just so everyone is aware of what's going on in my mind.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So going back to the first things to keep in mind, are those activities driven by local government?
I think they can be.
Okay. Other thoughts on how to rank? Councilmember Flaherty?
Probably honestly need if we're going to try to rank these 13 things, we probably need to have another survey that's literally put them in order and assign points and then average it across everybody. We want an actual system that's reflective of a balanced, I don't think we're going to reach consensus just by talking. So I think a survey to do that, if we're trying to rank these 13 things, which are admittedly of different kind and scope, but if that's the exercise, I think that is worthwhile to rank them. And I'll just, I think we're kind of stumbling our way towards something and trying things, which is great. And at the same time, the planning infrastructure and policy infrastructure of the city is not currently suited, I don't think, to a strong outcome-based budgeting system. Most of what we have major substantive areas of city government that have no formal plans at all, certainly not any legislatively adopted ones anyway, or that are reflective of both branches of the city government. So there's huge gaps on things like public safety. The plans we do have lack consistent frameworks for how they think about or name outcomes, if at all, how we measure for those outcomes. So 0 traffic fatalities and deaths by 2039, great, that's a very clear, smart outcome. But the devil's in the details of implementation, and just by way of example, the Indiana Avenue project, which we funded through a GO bond, has a third concept design out that made, without question, objectively unsafe decisions relative to prior concepts. I'm just using it as an example here. There are trade-offs involved, so we funded it, that's supporting that outcome, but now it's being changed in a way that is counter to the outcome, And so without good measurement and rigor in all of that, in a coherent framework, I think we're always just gonna be really hard pressed to really make something useful out of all this. Which isn't to deter us. I think this is a good exercise. I think we are moving forward in some way. I don't think it's useless. I do think we are naming things that have value and will still give some shape to things. But I guess I'm trying to note that because I don't want to want it to be a surprise later when I'm this list alone is just not how I'm going to be thinking about a budget vote and or engaging with the administration on the budget. I think it matters, but it's there's more to it than that considerably. And at the same time, I think I've offered to take on for the committee, which I'm sitting on this year, and really still hope that we can move towards something like a more coherent framework for the city that might involve updating plans in a consistent way that has near and midterm and long-term outcomes and an appropriate number of lead and lag measures for those things, so we can actually start systematically measuring progress and having like a coherent framework with which to engage a topic like this. That's not going to be fast, but I do think we should look to best practices and think about like what that actually looks like, and just again acknowledging that we're not there yet, and so there are some limits to what we can do here. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. I have a follow-up question for you too, or a follow-up thought, I guess, on that, because that kind of, so if we put out a survey and then assign points and put things in order based on the survey, then how is that honestly any different than what we already kind of have? Because it would essentially be like averaging things, and so it's one of those like nobody would probably get their first choice, and like is it different
than it has now?
Okay.
Right now, it's anyone's guess if any of these things mean more than anything else. But with a survey, we actually would know. Yes, it would be averages. It wouldn't be a mirror image of any individual's rank order, most likely. But I think some patterns would emerge, is my guess, and that still might be helpful, at least incrementally more helpful than the list as it stands now. So I don't think it's useless. I just think we have to acknowledge the limitations of this exercise for like outcome-based budgeting.
Okay. I'm not opposed to doing that. I kind of wish that I had done that in preparation for this meeting, but that idea like never came up. So, Councilmember, sorry.
I have a question. Just I want to query our thinking and just make sure that I've understood it correctly here as well. So the 13 here are the things that rose to the top from each of the buckets, but then that assumes that we. This is going to sound like I'm relitigating the question I asked earlier, which I'm not. I'm just curious about something. Are we saying that there's not a possibility where there's a fourth thing in bucket A that's higher than my top thing in bucket 3, right? And so like, so I'm wondering about that a little bit, like as we start thinking about prioritizing, and then as a follow-on point here, it's that some of these things aren't necessarily, like I feel very strongly, for example, about we phrase it in some way like execute on the plans that we already have. Okay, I feel very strongly about that. There's a lot of downstream things that come from execute on the plans that we have, and that's kind of quite a different thing than reduce income inequality, right? Like those they're just they're different. So I'm also struggling a little bit with how we even compare the list of 13 to begin with. So I wonder. So I don't know what. And so I guess
just imagine managing all of this data when it came in.
Exactly. Like so. And thank you for that work. I think maybe the question for us all is thinking about like how can we continue to synthesize this in a way where we get to, so that things are like that we're comparing like for like.
Well, and that like I don't know if we can ever really compare like for like. But that is why, at the end of this, there's like the data from the whole thing, and that is why, if you, and I also want to say, like, I made sure that this was an accessible document, and it makes it a little bit like grosser, like harder to like read compared to say like a spreadsheet where you can look more across a little bit easier, but. I'm trying to find one by looking across. So under transportation and mobility outcomes, for example, our top had 12 points, which was network supporting travel, all travel modes for people of all ages and ability. Second one had 11 points. Third one had 10 points. And then after that, it went right down to 5. So it was this steep drop off. And so in transportation and mobility, I would have put the top 3 in that one. Whereas in environment, we had a 12, a 6, a 6, and a 5. And so I think I put the top 5 in that one. And so that's where like it absolutely is some measure of discretion. And that's why I put that full data in, is that very thing. And that's why there's that example at the end of the list of 13 about public safety, about reducing crime. Yeah. Like we all probably want to reduce crime, but it's kind of an interesting outcome in terms of that survey. I don't, like, there were just, the crime one, or the public safety category was really interesting, actually. And if we looked more closely maybe at that public safety category, like, I think if we had discussed that one in the way that we discussed some of the other ones in December, some of those things, maybe they wouldn't have gone under public safety. You know, housing and homelessness like rose to the top in public safety and in housing. And if we had been discussing both of those at the same time, we probably would have categorized that into one or the other. And then how would we have voted? So it's really, I mean, it's one of those things where this was helpful. It gets us somewhere, maybe, but it doesn't get us to an end point. So if there is something like that, like Councilmember Asari just suggested, you know, something that's the number 4, that's the trailing, but wait a minute, like, I want to raise that up, or wait a minute, like, because here's another question, especially for those outcomes that were suggested through the survey by all of you, right? If let me see if I can find one. Let me get my window bigger. So if Councilmember Zulik suggested that, sorry, I called you out because you were the first one, so you're the first result, that Bloomington residents have options other than uniformed police officers for nonviolent issues. One example is community resource officers are often dispersed to crash sites. So I think that I put that in as example, community resource officers. But, you know, there's some other response related to that, right? And I think that that really overlaps with, let's see if I can find Councilmember Piedmont Smith's, which was mental health and addiction treatment services are increased to meet residents' needs. And those things could overlap in ways that if we were actually discussing them, they might have been combined into one thing.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
You know what we might think of doing for the next round of surveys is that instead of us, and this is building off of something that Councilmember Rosenberger said 2 years ago, because it was a really good idea. Give us, like, if we all had 100 points, you call it 1,000 points, whatever, right? You have some large amount of points, and you can distribute them however you want amongst all of these categories. Now, we've already started to say some initial ranking amongst the buckets, all that type of stuff, but I think that might give you a little bit of a better sense of the, like, I think we might get a little bit more space between things, right? And so that might be the way to do it, right? Because at the end of the day, the variation right now is going to be very small because we're talking about 3, 4. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So if you give us all 100 points, and then I can say, look, for me, you know, whatever wage, jobs, and GDP growth is 50 points. Like, that's the most important thing. It's not, Dave, but if it was, you know, like, if that's the most important thing, you know, whatever. Like, I say that's 50 points for me. Like, it does sort of change maybe the way that we think about and compare things, you know?
Might make us more judicious with our
Also that right,
answering.
but it also helps us think a little bit about our approaches, you know, because I think just sort of, you know, my starting place is that we don't want to be spreading the peanut butter super thin amongst a lot of things, but maybe some of us actually feel that way, that it's more like, yeah, all of these things are good, let's do a little bit of each of them. I think it would be really helpful to start to see where, you know, if I could put all my, anyways, yeah, I've made my point, sorry. I don't get to turn it off. So.
Other thoughts? Councilmember Zulik.
I have a different line, if everyone's done with this. Okay, thank you. This one is for Controller McKim. Sorry to tap you in here. Last year, I felt that a lot of the budget presentations were a little bit vaguer than they had been in previous years. And so I guess I'm wondering, to what extent can it get as explicit as this amount of money is allocated to this? Obviously, there's only so much time allotted to each presenter. So I'm just wondering, like, what are the reporting mechanism options and how can we get as specific as possible in terms of money to goal?
Well, I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about in what way it was vague. Let me just back up for a second. So I think as everybody knows, we still have to present and submit and pass a budget the way that you
Yes.
always have, by fund and by department and by category. So that's going to have to exist no matter what, when we have to do that. What I think we are hoping to do is, if we have some small list of kind of operationalizable priorities from council, we can then work to sort of tag or associate expenditures with that are still in their in the same form that they always have been, but also tag them with the council priorities. So is that the specificity that you're looking for? Specificity that is tied to this list of priorities that you're coming up with, or is it just more of a general, you didn't feel like you got an adequate narrative as to what was being requested, or just tell me a little bit more?
Well, there are the 4 budget categories that, like, we were very clear on, but I think it was hard for me to kind of decipher past that where things were going in terms of money, like very specific dollars. But I do think that would be very, very helpful in terms of adding on hey, this is what council said was a priority X. So thank you. That'd be very helpful.
I could build on that, if that's okay. I agree with the general point, and I expressed it last year, that I appreciate the effort that went into trying something new and different with priority buckets in the presentations, but I ultimately found it much less useful than the way budgets had been presented previously, and including in Mayor Thompson's first year, which was largely a reflection of past practice at that time. So I think comparing the budget presentations for the last 2 years would if you haven't done that already, Controller McCam, that would be helpful to kind of see at least some degree of what we're talking about. It used to be that, I don't know if this is a good system, but the departments would kind of set goals and then report on them also. Again, I'm not sure that needs to be replicated, but there was more detail and more granularity in what was being presented to us, kind of from like a programmatic or initiative or project dimension in past years relative to last year, which I think was still helpful. Yeah, so there's that. So that's just a comment to maybe share more, another opinion and more context on what Councilmember Zulik shared. But I'm also curious just to hear more from you. We talked about it in the fiscal committee a bit. How are you finding this list? Is it gonna be useful at all? Will it give you the contours of something to start to come back to us in time to have something where there's a back and forth and we're iterating on it? Or is it just sort of like we take this list, we're gonna do our best to interpret it, hope it goes well come August, and we'll live with it, or what?
Well, I will say from a budgetary standpoint, the way they are written right now, it's very difficult for me to be able to work with them. I mean, I understand them as priorities for the community. I think that they're probably, they seem like, I think most residents would probably look at them and say, yeah, that's exactly what we want our council to do, what we want our city to do. But and I kind of tried to make this point in the fiscal committee meeting, and Councilmember Strasburg already reiterated it and included it in the notes at the top, that we just need to kind of think through for each of these outcomes what part of it is driven by local government, and how do we measure both the outcome and how do we allocate or think about allocating funding for that particular outcome. Whether it's contracting or staff time or legislation, which isn't really a budgetary concern. So I think at some point this needs to move kind of to the next level, and at that point I think I can probably do a better job of understanding how to map costs and budget allocations to those outcomes. You see what I'm saying?
Councilmember Rallo.
Oh, well, first, I want to say how much I appreciate Councilmember Strasburg's work on this. It was a large effort, and it took a mathematician's probably mind to sort through the data. Just an old-timer's perspective, there used to be, back in the day, extremely detailed budget presentations, going back to what Councilmember Zulik talked about, and it gave us, not only us, but the public, an overview of exactly what city was doing. You know, the capital investments that were done, the programs that were offered, the services provided. All of those things were detailed in like 40-plus slide deck. I'm not asking for that. I'm not. But just to, you know, if you go back 15 years, you'll see that. It was incredible. Maybe it was excessive because, you know, it was an exhausting process. Now we have outcome-based budgeting, which is a great sort of directive for us. But I think that what this provides, I think, is a good rubric for you and the department directors to anticipate the questions that we will likely probe. I think it adds a good framework for, you know, like, for instance, high-performing government. For instance, is, I think, one of the highest scores was, let me think, maintain city assets, for instance. I gave it a rough Piedmont Smith. Actually, I think the first, what was the first? Anyway, it's no matter. Implementation of existing plans. Got these plans sitting around the shelf. Some of them are very specific in terms of what they direct us to do. Again, maybe excessively so, but it would be nice to reference those and say, have we made progress? You know, what's the CO2 output? You know, what have we done in terms of, are there any estimates in terms of local food, providing local, you know, those sorts of things. I'm very heavy on maintenance, so I would probably, you know, this council member will probably be asking about street maintenance, you know, the fleet maintenance for the city. You know, the downtown is very important, I think, economically. I want to make sure that it's an inviting place where people feel safe and invited and active and businesses are happy, et cetera, et cetera. In any case, maybe I'm sort of going off course, but I think this provides a good sort of litmus for you all to know where we're coming from. You know, if I'm not mistaken, you know, you're not just going to get, it's not going to be just like we're just throwing darts at a board. It's going to be directed. So I find utility in that. So.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just, you gave the example of maintain city assets. That's a particularly good example because that is something that is entirely under the control and responsibility of the city. And even though it's not necessarily easy to count the money that's spent on maintaining city assets, it's something that is definitely operationalizable. There are metrics that can be associated with maintaining city assets. So I think that's a particularly good example, even though it's, the way that it's reflected here is very top level, maintain city assets. It's pretty easy to see how that can be taken into something that could be useful in budgeting and budget presentations.
Thank you. Before you go, one of the things I want to point out from what Councilmember Rallo said about the implementing existing plans is, if you recall from our December session, Isabel, Councilmember Piedmont Smith came up with that original list of outcomes directly from all of our city plans. So in theory, there's at least some of these outcomes, like in terms of the actual specific language of some of them, that would also nest underneath the implementation of existing plans. And so it's hard to know, I mean, Councilmember, sorry, you said it, that concept was really important to you, but is that something that should be like at the top of a list for budgeting for 2027 specifically, or should that be more like at the top of a philosophical kind of list? Like, it's really important to us that we use the plans that we have, and but that's not necessarily, so then maybe in presentations, we want to know, the climate action plan might be, the CO2 levels and some of those details, and what have we done to affect that, and if there's a direct cost that can be associated with that. I just wanted to point that out as an interesting piece of number one, as is listed on here. And then the second thing I want to say is going back to what Controller McKim said, is going back to those, things to keep in mind, and maybe we should just go through, use our time to go through all the 13 and go, well, is implementing existing plans an activity driven by government? Is it measurable in terms of outcomes? Is the funding allocation measurable in terms of those things? And even if those things are important to us, if they can't pass those three things, maybe they need to go on a different piece of priority that is more of a philosophical priority as opposed to a budget priority. So are there thoughts on that idea? Councilmember Flaherty, was there something that you wanted to say before that?
Well, I think where I was headed is consistent with where you were just going, which is basically we can use some type of system to rank these things. We can talk through them, but how do we make it actionable in the absence of a coherent, actual systemic approach to this in government? Like, should we be talking through these, and are there any existing plans or metrics that, look, just pick one, right? It's okay, reduce systemic inequities. Item B, engagement processes are inclusive and representative. Okay, I'm taking that to mean public engagement on policy making, on services implementation. What are we doing on that front right now? Are we measuring anything at all? Do we have goals articulated somewhere about it to help guide it? And if not, is it reasonable to start measuring something? Are we, I don't know, asking for voluntary demographic and other data when people weigh in at design charrettes and meetings like this, and actually start tracking things like that over time. I think with this probably uniform set of a few questions, is this addressed at all in existing policy documents or plans? Are we measuring anything related to it now? And if no to those things, can we do something meaningful to start measuring it now, or at least try to give an indication of I don't know. It seems like we could settle on a limited set of questions that we probably apply to each of these that could try to move it in the direction of something actionable. Even if we can't accomplish it all tonight, we could workshop it, and then the committee could do more, and also offer opportunities, if not in the deliberation session, at least asynchronously for feedback from non-committee members. Again, to try to move this towards something that's closer to actionable.
Yeah, and if maybe we can narrow down some of these based on these questions, especially from Controller McKim, and then use those in a follow-up survey. Is that what you were going to suggest, Councilmember?
Yeah, I was going to build on all of this. That the thing that I've been trying to wrap my head around too is let's call it cost to move index, right? So some of these things on this list, and I'm playing around with a different thing with this in different ways, but developing new plans, waste reduction, strengthening food security networks are all things that we probably could make significant progress on with very little money, right? Whereas what you were just saying, the point about maintaining city assets is could be a huge thing, right? But it also, okay, so that's sort of one thing. So I think it might be useful for us to sort of think about cost to move index, so we know what are our big bucket items to begin with, and then we back to that mentality of do you fully fund this? Do you whatever? Some of those then would have to be adjusted. I think then to your earlier point, Councilmember Strasburg, is that I identified three things that I think could operate within that 13 that really are more I don't know, approaches or operational priorities, and one of them overlaps, but implementing existing plans is a philosophy, right? Where we want things to come from existing plans, and that is already implemented in our philosophy here, right? Development of plans where none exist might also be kind of an operational approach or a philosophy or something like that, and then maintaining city assets. So we might want sort of sub outcomes actually attached to those in some way, but yeah, so that's sort of what I'm trying to think about, is that if we think about what is expensive to move versus cheap to move, I think it's helpful in terms of okay, well, what really is the priority of this list?
Okay, do other people agree that those three are philosophical
And to be
kind
clear,
of-
I'm not saying exclusively philosophical. I'm saying that there's an element of them, right?
Okay.
So if we say we want to make plans where no plans exist, there's an element of that which is a fundable thing, right? But there's also an element of that which is saying there's a particular approach which we want to develop, which is saying we want to be plan driven, and so implement our plans first. And if you don't have a plan to implement, then make a plan so we can implement it, right? So that's what I'm saying, is that it is a fundable thing. So is maintaining assets, but we'd have to be a little bit more specific about what we mean by maintaining assets.
So is there anybody who would disagree with, say, a paragraph in a letter to the administration basically describing those three things as a philosophy and specifically calling out public safety as a place where there's not a plan that is a cohesive, like, understanding of public safety? Councilmember Rosenberger.
Anything here yet? Is it on? Okay. I'm having a harder time. I like this. I'm having a hard time seeing how maintain city assets fits in as a third. Like, I see implement existing and develop plans where none exist as, I think, philosophies to be like, who are we to make our own priorities? We have the plans and priorities kind of thing. I guess maintain city assets, to me, it falls more along the same lines as like make homelessness brief and rare and reduce systemic inequities. So I guess I think I'm not seeing the third connection as well.
How do other council members, sorry.
I'm trying to still. I was thinking out loud as well, right? Because what had me put it in that list is because I agree with the statement that Councilmember Rallo made, that I'm like, that is a priority. Generally speaking, that we do things like, you know, there's a lot of things that fall under that banner. You know, whether to me that includes sidewalks to like, you know, making sure that the doors are painted, right? Like, and there's a lot of variability within that, and so when I started thinking about how I think about all of those different things that we want to maintain, it begged more questions to me. I'm like, well, what do we want to maintain, and how do we want to approach the prioritization of the maintenance? If we might say as a whole, as a funding category, it's like thing that we as a council really want, you know, maintain basic stuff, right? But then I just think that would need more workshopping in the level of like a doing thing, but it may be something that guides all that we're saying, which is like bring stuff up to a certain standard or something like that is kind of what I'm trying to get my mind around. But again, I'm thinking out loud here.
Okay, so what about I'm trying to think ahead to this actual document or letter, right, that we need to ultimately agree on. So if there is a paragraph that philosophically talks about the implementation of plans and developing plans where none exist, specifically mentioning public safety because that was called out, and I mean, we couldn't really find good outcomes around public safety, and then not including maintained city assets, but as Controller McKim said, that those are calculatable in terms of, you know, these questions to keep in mind, like you can measure those, that investment, and to some degree you can also measure that outcome, you know, in terms of number of potholes that got filled, or, you know, and actually, you know, a time between a pothole being reported as existing and when it got filled. So there's lots of measurability in some of these maintenance kinds of things. So can we agree on that piece of the letter right now? Is there anybody who disagrees on that piece of the letter? Okay, what's your addition?
Well, I'm not attached to this, so I'll just put it out there. I think it could potentially be helpful for like the abiding by city plans, maintaining city assets, and creating plans, if that could be an interesting structure for the presentations. And so that way each department could be like, hey, we have these plans. This is how we plan on achieving whatever out of these plans. This is how we plan on maintaining city assets. And if there are no plans, this is our plan to create one. I think that would help me at least, I don't know about my colleagues, but I think that would be really helpful in wrapping our minds around what is doing what.
I would argue that I think part of at least what we talked about to some degree during fiscal committee, like this whole list should present like that.
Okay.
But that could also be something that gets put into a paragraph, I think, of this is how we want to see budget presentations.
Okay.
Like we want to know how the specific programs fit into this, because that's one of the things, I mean, we don't have specific programs in here, but there are specific programs that our city does, that our staff do, that would fall under here, right? And so it's going like, okay, we want to know what planning and engineering is doing this year to meet that 2039 goal of 0 injuries and fatalities. And so have that very, like, that's like my vision of that. Controller McCam, I don't know if that was what you were also thinking at all.
I mean, that certainly makes sense. That wasn't necessarily what I was thinking, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Councilmember, sorry.
I liken just triangulating on this idea as thinking about those elements as like tags, right? Because going further with the maintaining
City assets.
Yeah, maintaining city assets. There's an element of maintaining city assets that will contribute to reducing fatalities, right? And so like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, and again, I'm thinking out loud, so don't, like, I will not be upset if you disagree, but it gives this opportunity to sort of tag it as saying we want to see this all the way through the budget, right? And then we also want to see how you're contributing to these 10 things that we've, the 10 remaining things on the list, as an example.
So following that, going down to the 0 traffic fatalities or serious injuries by 2039, is that also something that should be more in a paragraph of this is important to us and it's important that we make incremental progress in various ways? Tell us how you're going to make that progress in a very specific, like tell me how you're going to move us toward this in 2027 because this is very important. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm gonna answer your question because I feel like it headed in a different direction a little bit. The word maintenance sort of implies status quo and keeping things the same, whereas most of what we're doing is actually trying to get better, and transform and improve. And so I wonder if I'm not wild about the frame maintaining city assets or elevating that to too high a level relative to other policy changes that aren't asset intensive exactly as one might traditionally think of those. Maybe like capital expenditures is like a better way to think about that, including both for like maintenance, improvements, operations, projects. And back to your, Councilmember, sorry, your kind of cost to move index.
Yeah.
It's like, the transportation system is incredibly capital intensive. And that's both repaving streets, making improvements to streets, making curb ramps more accessible. It's a whole lot of stuff, right? And like, so I'd encourage us to move beyond maintenance a little bit. I'm just kind of also just workshopping, thinking that maybe capital investments is a better way to think about that. And then that helps also distinguish that from things like policy implementation that are really about resourcing it through staff time, but in ways that are consistent with the outcomes that we're prioritizing that are in our city plans. And that's sometimes where, I gave an example earlier, but it also had a capital component. But I think we run into trouble sometimes of like, on the implementation side, it's not that it's actually like a lot of money, it's that we're not doing it. So yeah, I don't know, just some thoughts.
So I guess, like, once again, so I'm trying to like format the next survey I'm gonna send you, but maintain city assets could still be like a line in, how would you prioritize this or how many points would you give this? But I would take out implement existing plans and take out develop plans where none exist because I would put them in a paragraph form as opposed to a ranked list because they would be this philosophical, it's really important to us that we implement our existing plans. And so that would be taken out of the ranked list. I guess that's what I'm trying to propose.
Kate had her hand up for a long time.
Councilmember Rosenberger.
I think that is right. I was going to ask what Councilmember Ruff thought about that, what Councilmember Flaherty said too about the maintained city assets, because I was thinking that when Councilmember Asari was saying it, that maintain sounds like our whole purpose is to keep everything the way it is, where we would maybe get a lot of points for repaving a road, which like increases speeds, which is, like not necessarily good for bike ped people, or potholes are the reverse speed bumps, then what? That's not popular. Okay, so I do like, because when I read maintain city assets, I didn't think so much about like repainting doors, but I did think about how we have a huge, 50-year sewer replacement, right? And I think about those things that will like bankrupt the city if we are not planning for them fiscally every year to like make sure, right, we are replacing all of those things. So, and like our plants and all of that. So I wanted to hear from you two if that makes more sense with the capital expenditures rather than maintain city assets.
Councilmember Rallo.
You're running afoul of the nine-headed beast, because we all have different viewpoints, but I like the word maintenance. Entropy is real. I feel it every day. It's predictive. You should be able to tell at what pace roads degrade. And so I like maintenance as a word because of what it, so take an example, and it could be very quantitative. Number of miles of roads paved per year. I can go to the map and I can see it. However, I don't know what that means in the context of, I was told once long ago that it was a 20-year repaving schedule. Now, I don't know if that's appropriate or not, and I know some roads wear out earlier than others, et cetera, but in any case, you should be able to plot how many miles we paved this year, how many we did last year, how many we're going to do next year, and you've got a trajectory now. You can draw a line and you can say, how many years will it take to repave all the roads? And that would be a good to know, and something I could tell constituents that, we're going to get on this schedule. It's revolving. It's not like we're neglecting the roads. And by the way, the cost goes up. And so if we're going to maintain that trajectory, it's probably going to mean additional capital expenditures and budgeting for those because, the cost of asphalt goes up or whatever. So I do like that part. Now, back to zero fatalities by X date, that's aspirational. And that involves a lot of moving parts. You don't just order it like you do repaving a road. It involves a lot of things and is much more difficult to unpack. I'll let it go.
Councilmember Asari, and then I want to keep on trying to move down the list.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things that's coming up here, and I really love what both of you just said, is twofold. I don't think that it's zero sum between the question of maintenance and improvement. I think that we maybe want to split those and actually have both of those as sort of things that we highlight and feature in our budget. One of the things I really like to two finger or whatever, double say yes to that Councilmember Rosenbarger said was, that there are some investments that we need to make in the infrastructure in this city that if we don't make those investments and are going to bankrupt us, as an example, or they're going to become increasingly more expensive to maintain if we don't maintain them now, and that both as a guiding element to how we're approaching the budget as sort of like the top level, like this is so I'm submitting to us that may be our number one priority because it's the one very clear thing that's coming out of the conversation. I don't think that though that's contrary to the idea that on top of that, there's a certain amount of things that we want to make sure that you're doing, which goes hand in hand with due plans that we already have. There's a certain amount of maintenance that we want to see, but we also want some real capital investment, right? And so I think that you could sort of say that as the philosophy towards whatever we want to call this thing, maintaining and improving our infrastructure or something like that, and that there's a paragraph associated with that, but then that there also, I think maybe our next conversation and something you might want to put on the survey is like, what type of things do we actually want to see here? I think Councilman Rallo brought up some things, certain, X percentage of roads paved, less, I finally got the joke about the, reverse speed bumps, less speed bumps, right? Or, right, so I just think that there's a lot there that's really clear that we're really, sort of getting on the same page about.
Okay. Thank you. So I will try to when compiling this letter or document or whatever, try to finesse that, maintain city assets, potentially breaking it into two things, a maintenance and an improvement, or combine them into one and put that on the survey and see how that goes. So let's try to move down this list in the context of these questions that Controller McKim gave us. So making homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating, which rose to the top in two different categories. And those things underneath it were just other things that rose to the top, or actually got any votes at all in some cases that I felt like, well, that really connects in some ways with homelessness. And that's the other thing, is there were probably a whole nother slew of things that we could have put under there that also connect to homelessness. So this is another opportunity to be like, hey, like put this other thing under there too. But the first question is making homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating driven by local government?
Yes.
Is it a measurable outcome?
Yes.
And is the funding allocation for that outcome measurable?
Yes.
That's harder to know. Controller McKim, what do you think about the answers to those three
Definitely
questions?
need to have a lot more guidance on that, because I would not have necessarily answered yes to all those questions.
I can tell you, just a highlight of this, I spent all day today with heading home, the mayor, people from county council, et cetera, talking about some new thing that Heading Home wants to do around homelessness, and it was a very clear like input output type of design where you could say, you know, we need so many houses that we're going to spend this much money on, and that's how we're going to end, you know, not end, but you know, get to functional zero. So like people are thinking in those ways, and the question becomes like, what is the city willing to put to make that happen, right? So yeah, no, I think that is a total thing where you can measure what. Now, there's things that are outside of our control within that realm, but absolutely, it's something that we can fund and see outcomes for.
So are all of these subcategories then also accurate in terms of like, because I guess I'm thinking about number one, you know, is this activity outcome driven by local government? And I would not necessarily answer yes to that in this very definitive way, like because it does depend on how much money we as government invest or have to invest.
But that's, I think
so
that's the key point, that, yeah.
Yeah, and then if we invest that in this, what are we not spending money on?
Correct.
Controller McKim.
Yeah, and I guess so you have 5 separate kind of subtopics under make homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating. And I guess to what degree are you addressing just that top level number 4 versus the 5 bullets under that? You know, I think the answers to those questions probably differ for each of those 5 sub-bullets, like job and wage growth. I'm sorry, but there's not that much.
Right. And so that's where, like, the way that it's like they're nested. It's like if this seems like the top level goal, and job and wage growth could contribute to making homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating. Increasing coordination of services could help with that overall goal. So they're like there are more specific outcomes that we could invest in, and that became another, it's those nested outcomes, because in theory, we could nest everything under one big outcome. Yes. And it really makes the mind go like this.
I have an important note, just like collective memory note. One of the big discussions that we've had over the last year and a half, particularly last year in fiscal committee, is that when it gets down to how are we going to make homelessness rare, brief, and like we chose not to say that we're going to get into the nitty gritty as a council, all 9 of us saying, okay, well, we want this and we don't want this and we don't, at least at this stage, that we're saying this is what we want you to come and tell us, people who are, in all of the departments, this is what we're telling you is the priority, so you tell us how you're going to do it, at least at that stage. Now, I think it's useful for us to have the conversation, because it's useful for us, we all have areas of expertise where we'll say, actually, no, here's some very specific things I'd like to see in the budget, but we wanted to make sure that the sort of, what do you call it, the agency of deciding how we operationalize that, it rests with the departments, right? So I think that helps a little bit here, that we don't need to decide, amongst the sub things, all of the things that we want to see, because the decision will happen at the council meeting. We could then say, I don't like that one, actually. I'd like to rather fund this one twice or something like that.
Yeah, and so I want to make clear that the sub things are things that people voted on. Sometimes
Correct.
they were maybe voted heavily on,
Right.
or had lots of points, but I went, this is really a subcategory under this larger
Yeah.
thing. Councilmember Rosenberger.
We were just looking for, where is the vote for job and wage growth? Or did you combine multiple? I know she was saying there maybe in other places that, because I was like, is that an economic development?
I think it's an economic development. And that's where, like, I tried to really lead y'all through my thinking process, but then I put it in the packet kind of in reverse of the thinking process. So under economic development outcomes, we had wages, jobs, and GDP are outpacing population growth as having 6 points. And then there was also attract employers that provide living wage jobs that had 4 points. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there was another one too. Per capita, oh no, that's not right. There was attract 24 to 44 workforce, which was 2 points, which is kind of related to that too. And then there was economic inequality is reduced, which also could be wage and job growth. So it wasn't that exact phrase, wage and job growth, but that phrase I thought kind of summarized some of the other pieces.
Thanks, yeah.
Other thoughts about housing and homelessness, Councilmember Rallo?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask our controller,
There we
kind
go.
of, maybe, you can hear me? When you queried, council, several members said, yes, this is government responsibility, and you have some quibble with that.
Oh, no, not with that part.
Okay.
No, definitely local government does have a role in reducing homelessness. Yeah, no, my concern was just the very high level of the outcome of some of the, particularly with the 5 sub-bullets.
Well,
so it was actually, my issue was more with the 5 sub-bullets.
Well, let's take a couple. Job and wage growth. I mean, we could target tax abatements that are specific to companies that are raising the wage floor, right? Yeah. We raised the wage floor of employee salaries in the city, which isn't a minor number of employed people in the city. In terms of mental health, and addiction treatment, that's probably more county related, but we could have an interlocal. I would hope that the new jail would have those services provided, because I think that's essential, but that's the county, probably. But we're in agreement generally that we have an impact. It's just to a greater or lesser degree.
Yeah. Yes.
And maybe how to categorize it. So in this follow-up survey of ranking, should I just leave it as make homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating, and drop all of the sub-bullets?
I like the sub-bullets. I mean, it adds a detail that.
Well, I think the sub-bullets are like how to potentially get there. I feel
Yes.
like I'm off again. And so I think the question goes back to what Councilmember Asari was pointing out. It's like, do we just want to tell the administration, we care about this thing, figure out a way to spend money in a way that's going to impact the thing, or do we want to say, we want to impact this thing in this very specific way?
Yes, I find it helpful. I find that those are helpful. They're not exclusive to other means of getting there.
Exactly, yeah.
And
Okay.
I certainly don't want
Okay.
to put parameters that these are the only way.
Exactly.
Okay.
in which it can happen.
Okay, so maybe on the survey that I follow up, leave it as make homelessness brief, rare, and non-repeating, but then put these in to the letter underneath there as in ways like this. Okay.
For example,
Okay.
this is, yeah.
Great. Okay. Any other feedback on number 4?
I was just gonna, I just want to chime in on that what you're saying is, I think because we all did the work and you did the work to say these were bullets that got hit on a lot, I do think it's useful to include them.
Okay.
Right, because it is what we said, like
Okay.
increase affordable housing options, right, and early intervention. So I think it is good to be like, here are some things that we're thinking about, but the list is not exhaustive.
Okay.
Is that right?
Great.
Yeah.
Councilmember, sorry.
Again, two-fingering the same thing. It's like you say, yeah, I think we have sort of two outputs here. You're going to create another survey for us to maybe a little bit to help prioritize. Great. But there's the other side, which is, the actual format of the letter or whatever, resolution or whatever we want to send forth. And I think you're already writing some of it, like now. It makes a lot of sense. We say our priority is make homelessness rare, brief, and non-repeating. This is where it ranks within our priorities. And here are all of the many ways that we liked of ways to do it, but we're recognizing that's not the exhaustive list. Right? I think that's things that we're willing already to fund, I think is a great way of putting it.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to number 5? Great. Increase housing diversity within neighborhoods. And then underneath that, increase predictability for permitting approvals, increase range of affordable housing options, including those with universal design and/or environmentally sustainable. And so, is this outcome or activity driven by local government?
Yes.
Is it measurable?
What, increasing diversity of housing?
Yeah.
Yes.
And is the funding allocation for the outcome measurable? Partially. I guess I feel like I need to follow up with this with number 4. The questions, the things to keep in mind, number 4 is, does this outcome require direct fiscal investment, staff time, or legislation? And this is where I feel like number 5, in terms of government role in that, would involve legislation.
For example?
A code change.
For example?
Yeah. So this... So this, in terms of the letter, is that this requires staff time, legislation for a code change.
I have it on my cheapish to move category,
Yeah.
but I struggled where.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Okay, where do existing plans factor into, and like I'd sort of asked the question, I guess we go through these, are we going to request from the administration that they share information on this framework, and are we asking them to say what in our city, I don't know, I feel like we're a little divorced right now from specific things that are called for in documents that I think relative to this exercise are, I don't know, a little bit, went through certainly a much more robust process as far as community input, legislative adoption, et cetera. So I think there's synergies. We're just not talking about that piece right now. And I'll return to the fact that the devil's in the details on all this. I think increased housing diversity within neighborhoods. The mayor probably says she's doing that. I disagree. Devil's in the details of what policies. There's policies called for in our plans that we're not implementing. So how do we, those are measurable. They're legislatively adopted. They're in existing plans. How do we make sense of that in the context of these priorities?
To be honest, I would take this one out of my priority list for 2027 because it's legislative, it's cheap, and I think that we should do it in 2026. I would just take that out. I that's my personal thing is that we could do that this year, despite staffing challenges, and so that's just my position, kind of in that, because that to some degree is up to us as a body to figure out ways to to do that. And I know that the mayor's administration is trying to do some different things with permitting already, which we don't have any control over, is that permitting piece. But
I'll push back a little bit. Just because it's legislative doesn't mean it's exclusively our purview. We have staff experts in urban planning, for instance. Most legislation comes to the administration. And just as a pragmatic matter, it is true that when the administration weighs in heavily on a legislative item they did not develop, they're able to affect it to a meaningful degree. And so if yes, we can pass legislation over their opposition. It doesn't happen often. And so I think we'd be naive to say, because it's legislative, we don't need to put it in a set of priorities and get the mayor's buy-in because it's just our job. It just doesn't work like that in practice.
well, that's not exactly what I meant, but it's more like we could do that this
Yes,
year,
we could make
like as a
progress
body. And I mean,
later
some
this
of that
month.
is what
Yeah.
Director Hiddle was talking about at our meeting last week too. So in some ways, that might be happening this year already. Councilmember Daly.
Yeah, but I mean, that's exactly what I was just going to say, was what Councilmember Flaherty said, is that we can legislate, that opens pathways to it, but that doesn't mean anything is going to happen, right? That's the first step, but we need more to happen beyond just us legislating. So I would leave it on here, but that's just my vote.
Councilmember, sorry.
I think another element of this, agree with both of those statements. Another element of this, though, is like staff time, which is, a part where we have to say, justify, I mean, it sounds meaner than maybe it is, but it's like justify that you need X amount of people in X office because this is the thing we're moving towards. Why is said thing not moving forward, right? And it's like if you're not going to align with our priorities, then we won't fund your activities, right? I mean, is one way that we could approach such a conversation. So I think it is very important, even with things like this, that many ways could be very cheap to to push forward, that we hold the administration to account of saying, tell us how you are going to do this year. And I also, I mean, we had conversations at our very first budget meeting around this, and the Councilmember Flaherty and I've talked about this on the dais, where it's like, I asked a question about, hey, are we going to see some changes towards form-based code and whatever? And they were like, yeah, that's what we'll do next year. And so we need to do these things this year. And then next year it was like, no, we're not going to do that anytime soon, right? So having a clear conversation like that, I think, is really important, that we keep those priorities, even if they're cheap.
Okay. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
One tiny thing, I didn't, the word affordable was difficult for me to sort of understand in increased range of affordable housing options. I mean, did we mean housing options, or do we mean affordable as in AMI percentages, or did we mean different options, different, home prices? I took it to mean increased range of housing options.
So that particular outcome, oh, now I'm going to have to open up the December thing. That's the first one on my spreadsheet, which means that it is one of the ones that came from a plan that Isabel would have marked in the December meeting, and I don't have that particular packet pulled up. So so that's where you could track that from if you weren't sure about how to interpret that. Councilmember Piedmont Smith and I actually had a conversation about one of the other ones, and it wasn't that one when we were preparing for this, because she had comments. And some of these outcomes, that whether they came from plans or whether they came from individuals suggesting them, they're easily interpretable in different ways. But yeah, that scored 7. Tied actually with increased predictability and decreased time for permanent approvals, so that's interesting. All right, so what I'm hearing so far is that I'm keeping the top level things on the survey and then putting the lower level things into the examples. Yes. Okay, so we're good on number 5 then? Number 6, reduce systemic inequities. is it an outcome or activity driven by local government? Number 6, reduce systemic inequities. I will also say that we played with this one a little bit because we had these other lower level things, the ABC about reducing income inequality, making sure engagement processes are inclusive and representative, reducing race and class disparities in our various systems. And those 3 things all received high scores. And this was one of the things Councilmember Piedmont Smith, as another member of the Fiscal Committee, thought that those should be grouped together differently as opposed to grouping them underneath other things to pull out and have a whole systematic inequity as sort of category. So I think we're still answering the question, is this an activity or outcome driven by local government?
Often, yes. Most systems are subject to some degree of inequity. It's sort of like the water we swim in. We can't control all those systems, but the government interacts with and perpetuates and creates many systems. So like, it's such a broad statement, reduce systemic inequities. But yes, of course, many of the things the government does and engages in have systemic inequities that we could work on addressing. And having probably some framework, expertise, goals on doing that in our various systems would be helpful. Like, I don't know, like in utilities and other services, right? Like, it's not a particularly equitable system when everybody pays the exact same amount. We can't do, I don't think, we don't expect the IURC would approve income tiered rates. But something I've contemplated is, could you do like a bill discount that's funded not through the rate base, but from the general fund? Like when we had $1 million that we were using for paying off medical debt for a limited number of folks in the wake of the lit increase. That was like part of the like, okay, let's focus some on like economic inequities. You could make that go a lot farther if you were saying everybody below a certain income threshold who gets City of Bloomington utilities is going to get $300 a year off on their bills, you know, partial over monthly. Like that addresses like an energy insecurity issue in a fairly broad-based way. Just like, I'm spitballing, like just like an example of a thing like people's ability to afford basic needs, basic utilities varies. So it's not an equitable system, it's full of inequities. We have limitations in what we can do about that, but there are creative ways to do something about it. And so like, it's just to illustrate that like these inequities are everywhere, of course. The transportation system is deeply inequitable, and that's part of what our other goals are about. So just to think, yes, it's government.
I think
for sure.
The word should be, instead of reduce income inequality, which is a tall order, to address income inequality. Because you can address income inequality by, say, providing good transportation that obviates the need for a car.
Housing.
And you know, rather than you know, the idea that we could cut everyone a check or something of a certain, you know, even though that's a possibility too, that we could maybe have some tiered services or something in terms of income. But addressing it would be a better word, I think, because reducing it is.
I don't mind reduce at the high level. I'm fine with address for the sub-bullet. I mean, and to me, we have talked about operationalizing equity and systematic approaches to equity and equity frameworks like over the last couple of budget cycles. We haven't made progress. I know there's been some sort of like preemptive Trump compliance kind of stuff thrown about. There's we've articulated a few examples here. So kind of like a procedural equity element of like engagement processes, right? We're talking about income specifically, and we're talking about the public safety system specifically, and particular types of disparities there. But the inequities are much farther reaching than that. There's safety inequities in the transportation system. There's on and on. And again, like where my mind kind of goes on this as far as like measurable and outcome, like can we measure the funding and all that? Like it's like we don't have a coherent system to try to reduce systemic inequities right now. And if that's the broad top line goal here, we would have to take steps toward doing that. I think they are measurable. I think you could talk about a budget impact. So I guess, yeah, I favor that a little more versus, I mean, I support the sub-bullets too. I think they're important areas where we've identified specific, but I just wanted to name those extend farther than those sub-bullets too.
Okay. So Councilmember Flaherty just made an argument for, is this driven by local government with like, yeah, we can affect certain parts of it. Does anybody want to make a different argument? Councilmember Rosenberger?
It's not different. It's not different. I just, though, wanted to say, we're talking about what can kind of be measured.
Well, I'm not to the measured yet. Do we want to go to the measured? If we all tend to be like, yeah, Councilmember Flaherty made a good argument, so then we can go on to question number 2, is the outcome measurable?
Okay. I mean, I can weigh on that still, that I think it is a good argument. And I mean, I think in terms of equity and inequity in our city, we don't have the city doesn't operate with a definition of equity, I think. I mean, so it's like, there's a long way to go on this one. So I think starting would be good. Right, like some cities, I think, have great examples of departments and definitions and what that means and what can be triggered if it's not getting implemented and things. And so I think that would be great. And just something that we've talked about potentially starting to measure is who is engaging publicly and who isn't, which is then something to look at to be like, hey, you know, mostly white people are speaking at our meetings, and so just, I guess I just thought about something to measure. I know other cities do ask people to fill out some demographics in public comment.
Okay, great. So that addresses the question, is it measurable? So yes, driven by local government to some extent. It can be measurable. Certain things can be measurable. Is the funding allocation for that outcome measurable?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Can I say one more brief thing on that?
Yeah.
Which is that I recently found out through my day job about an organization called Viva DEI. If you go to vivadei.org, it's sort of a resource that was set up specifically in the context in the wake of a lot of the sort of current federal administration's attacks on the idea of equity and inclusion, or the importance of diversity in thinking about how we govern or how we, do anything. So anyway, lots of cities are still making progress on these issues, and I think there's I would encourage my colleagues to check it out, because I think it can speak to this particular context for this goal.
Okay. Next, number 7, vibrant and resilient economy. Is the activity or outcome driven by local government?
I think it's very similarly to the homelessness conversation. I think to a large extent, yes. Yes.
Is everybody good with that yes answer? Is the outcome measurable?
I sort of had so I'll tell you where I struggled here, because generally this is a priority for me, but the words vibrant and resilient are words that could mean lots of things to lots of people. So, so I think we need to operationalize that one a little bit, change that one a bit, but.
So do you think that title, vibrant and resilient economy, needs to be adjusted, or do you think that the examples underneath it need to be potentially expanded?
Yeah.
Because there's probably other things that could fit underneath vibrant and resilient economy. And I mean, number 8 is create vibrant third places, neighborhood hubs, activating vacant spaces.
Yep.
Public spaces are high quality, engaging, and active. Those things in some ways could combine together. One is more talking about social stuff, I think, and one is more talking about economic stuff, or like social community kind of building, which is not necessarily economic. Certainly, you can have a very vibrant community that has no money. But like, you don't need money to make community. But there's similarities
You don't
there.
think
So that was a question to Councilmember. Sorry for just a minute. Do we need to workshop the top
can I say
level
that?
or the bottom?
Well, I actually agree, I really, this is something that Councilmember Rosenbarger just said that I really agree with. I think the issue with the framing currently is that it might lead to a reinforcing of the thing that we got last year in our budget, which is, yeah, everything is this, you know, and so you could talk about anything as vibrant and, you know, happy economy or whatever we said. I do think some of the things under it, wage growth, you know, jobs, increased number of employees living and working in Bloomington. I mean, all of those things are type of things that I'd like to see us investing in. But I think we need to workshop this a little bit. But I mean, it does come directly from one of our plans, but I think we need to workshop a little bit how it's framed so that doesn't, you know, it could go in a lot of directions.
Okay, Councilmember Rallo.
I think the word was operationalize.
Yep.
I think I understand. I mean, number of locally owned businesses would be a good measure, as opposed to businesses that, you know, where profits go somewhere to shareholders far away. I think GDP is increasingly a bad measure for economic well-being. I think that you could have 1/10 the population profiting very well and 90% doing very poorly and have a positive GDP. So I think we need to look into other measures of well-being for the community. And one would be, you know, to what extent do we recirculate wealth in the community? And that would probably require a consultant or something, but I like to see how many dollars recirculate as opposed to just exit the community. So.
Okay.
Income leakage is very important in economic development circles.
Okay. So what I hear is you agree with it as a concept, but the title, Vibrant and Resilient Economy, needs to shift. And I'm not actually sure, without looking, and I honestly don't want to take the time right now to do it because we're kind of running out of time, how much I subcategorized other things under that, or whether Vibrant and Resilient Economy was one of those things that got the most votes. And if it was, it probably comes directly from a plan. So I can, if it did, then I can look back at that December meeting and figure out the source with Councilmember Piedmont Smith and see if there's a way to make that clearer. So if y'all kind of give me grace to do that for the follow-up survey, I suddenly have a whole lot of work to do with a follow-up survey. I'll get there. Okay. So create vibrant third places / neighborhood hubs. Is that driven by government?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Closing Kirkwood as an example.
Yeah. Is it measurable? Is the outcome measurable?
How that was a question I had, like what metrics would we be asking to see out of third space?
Well, we could do attendance at various things like we do for certain Kirkwood events. We could also do the amount of events that happen throughout the year, the distribution of events. I know we have a lot on Kirkwood, but if we wanted to expand that, expand the third spaces past Kirkwood, like do we have events going on the west side, on the east side, like simultaneously so that all of our residents can thrive? I think those are all measurable.
I would also say that a measure of that could be businesses that would move in to different areas to create those neighborhood hubs would be something else that was potentially measurable.
And I think that, is this on? Yeah. If we look at our zoning maps, we need to make sure neighborhoods all have areas zoned that can be hubs. Right. I think that's the neighborhood hub part of it for me. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And is the funding allocation for that outcome measurable? Yeah. Okay, great. Number 9, Bloomington residents have options other than uniformed police officers for nonviolent issues. Is it driven by government? Yes. Is it a measurable outcome? Yes. And is the funding allocation measurable?
Yes.
Great. Number 10, 0 traffic fatalities or serious injuries by 2039. We've already talked about this a little bit. And I also put down, just in my notes when we were talking about it before, this question, is this also more philosophical? like Councilmember Asari was saying, because because it connects to city plans, it's technically a part of the transportation plan. So should this just get moved into that paragraph related to implementing the plans that we have and call it out as a very specific piece that we want to know and we want to invest in steps?
I think that question actually helps clarify how the other two operate that we've suggested as sort of guiding principles different than this one, because this one is a clear, we have a whole plan for this, and us putting this as a priority in our budget is us telling the office of the mayor and the city's broader administration to come and tell us, what are you doing this year in funding to move this forward? I mean, I think it's super straightforward. We want that. We want to make sure that it stays a priority and so on and so forth.
So does it belong in the top level paragraph of implementing? No, it belongs in the survey.
Because I think the part of the top level is already covered by do our plans. So the part of at the under level is yeah.
Here's one that we're calling out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Does anybody have any opposing? Councilmember Flaherty.
I was going to move on to one of the sub-bullets. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just that I'd like to perhaps have a deliberation session next month. I could even lead it on pedestrian network being cleared quickly and effectively after snowfall. This is a persistent challenge. Obviously, the existing policy landscape is inadequate. So and this isn't really, I mean, it's definitely recovered, it's covered kind of conceptually in the Safe Streets for All action plan. But it will entail changes that are probably different and more specific, including funding, all measurable for sure, including the outcomes and the impact, that is different than what's in the plan. So that's another reason that this, in favor of this sort of being specifically called out.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So you want me to pull out that?
No. I'm just saying, item 10 here.
Oh, should be specifically called out because.
Keeping item 10
okay.
in the
Okay.
sort of list of, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's another, that particular 110A, I think was one of the top, however many under transportation, and I stuck it underneath the zero traffic fatalities or serious injuries because, it is such a safety impact.
Yeah.
And of course, it's other things too, going back to Councilmember Zulik and what she said in the beginning in terms of her priorities, in terms of making sure our residents are able to access the things that they need, that they have the stuff that they need. And if you're dependent on the pedestrian network in order to get those things that you need, then that really breaks down. So we're good on that. Strengthen food security networks. Is it driven by government?
Not entirely, but partially.
And by local government specifically?
Yes. There are actions we can take to improve this, yes.
Okay.
Might fall under equity, other things like that. I mean, similar to other conversations, but there are actions we can take, and food security is something we've all said we care about a lot.
Okay.
About food, yep.
Yep. Is the outcome measurable?
Yes.
And is the funding allocation for the outcome measurable?
Yes.
Okay. Air quality is maintained at a high level and carbon emissions are reduced, driven by local government.
Somewhat.
Measurable outcome, funding allocation.
Let me just ask,
Yes, please.
Are we talking about air quality and carbon emissions reduced by the city fleet, or are you just talking overall?
I think it's overall, that's actually, that's one of those outcomes that is in our climate action plan. So it's overall that we want those reductions. And so I think that's one of those things, in terms of actually doing it, we can mostly affect what the city itself is doing because we can't force other people to transition, but we can give incentives to people to transition. So there's all those grants through the Sustainable and Economic Development Department around adopting other alternatives and
code changes. There's a whole range of policies.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
whole plan for it. yes,
Right.
city operations and community-wide, and the degree of control varies, just like all of these, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, we can control some of it and can't control some of it, of course, because it's not like we live in a bubble with only our air quality. We get that nice wildfire smoke sometimes coming from lots of other places. So, all right, we're good with that. Leave it in there. Waste reduction. Is it affected by government?
Yes.
Is the outcome measurable?
Yes.
Is the funding allocation measurable?
Yep.
Great. What should we do about this crime is reduced? Little note down here. Does anybody want me to go ahead and put that into the survey?
A lot of these.
Speed, what was the crime reduced?
Councilmember Zulik.
Well, a lot of these subpoints, and for anyone who is looking, it is on the same page, on page 5 at the very bottom, crime is reduced. A lot of them are already covered in different categories, so I wonder if we could, I think, actually all of them are covered in other categories. I would say that crime is reduced is a very broad category, and I think that they fit better in other categories, if my colleagues agree with me.
Agreed.
So leave it off because it's covered in other places.
Yep.
Okay. Councilmember Arello.
Well, and it also fits into the development of plans where none exist, notably public safety, which is,
It's true.
I mean, I think the two primary things that could evolve from is, number one, there was a CAPS report, which I think is mostly anecdotal, but I think useful. And then there was the Novak report in 2018 for 21st century policing, and I think it evolved from that. That gives some information too, but clearly we need a kind of a comprehensive approach to public safety.
Agreed.
And reducing crime is an outcome of that, so.
Here's another kind of question I have around that. Like, if we want to make that kind of a 2027 budget priority, and this will be like the last thing, and then we're going to go to public comment. Do we have an expectation in 2027 that it would be a plan that would be developed with, say, a consultant and all of those pieces, or would it be something that is developed more in-house through a cooperative, process between council, administration, police department, community input, CAPS Commission, all of those things? Because that's a good thing to kind of understand and clarify, because I guess that kind of, I feel like plans that are done by consultants are usually like, they're like, this is a horrible way to say it, they're like plans, whereas when you do that in-house thing, it's like more like just a first level plan that maybe isn't as comprehensive, but at least might get to some of what we want to do. I guess I'm just trying to figure out like what kind of, how to write it up and what kind of expectation we would have for 2027.
Can I make a suggestion that when you send out the survey as well, and I guess we'll have a time before we send out the letter of resolution or whatever we send, but one thing that we might want to think about are other sort of guiding principles, right? And last year this came up through our budget conversation, where we were actually like, and Councilmember Rosenberger said it as well, was this idea of less planning, more doing, right? As one was saying. So I think it would be useful for us to have further conversations about that. How do you want to guide the question of whether or not and how often and how much we engage with consultants, as an example, particularly in a restrained resources time. That if we already have lots of plans, and that's sort of principle 1 or 2 for us, do we want to sort of put a restriction on, and here are the places where we want you to engage with, consultants, and in what ways? So.
Okay, so maybe we should consider having a future deliberative session just about this concept of a public safety plan and like a shared understanding of.
I think we're in a. I think we all agree on the public safety plan. I was just saying generally, just because you mentioned
Right.
that idea of do we want to get consultants. I do think that's a broader conversation we should have. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long one, but just a conversation that we have at some point about structuring how we as a council would like to see both consultants engaged with and then followed through with. I think is sort of it's in between those two things of the making plans where they don't exist and following through with our plans, because since I've been on council, we have paid for consultants where I haven't seen the results yet. Branding exercise for the city, updating permitting, like we all these things. Somebody to come and tell us how to tell people about recycling was like $300,000. Like, then these things are just, okay, we did them, and then, we're on stage 17 of deciding about Indiana Avenue, okay, like, and Kirkwood, and so. It was not fair to say that.
Councilmember Rallo, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
I know I'm concur.
Okay.
I'm in
Great.
agreement. I did have something to add at the end, but
I've got something.
Okay. Councilmember Rosenberg.
I've got two things. The first one is, I like Councilmember Strasburg, your question that I think could like transfer into budget questions for the administration, that like these are our priorities, but if it isn't a priority or if it's something the administration is like, nah, your number 5, is this the priority for 2027? If not, how should the priority be reflected in 2027? I like that, just so like everything gets addressed in some way. I mean, I know we're not at our final stages yet, but Councilmember Zulik, I think, said like a couple questions that maybe we want answered in the budget slides.
Right.
And I think that would be really good too, that like, if not now, what kind of prep is there and what is it going to look like in the next year or something? And then number 2, just a little bit about the plans. The famous comedian Michelle Wolf likes to say, I've got plans on waffles. So
I didn't quite hear you.
I've got plans on waffles. It's just nonsense sometimes. It's funny.
So much nonsense. And on that note, Councilmember Asari, President Asari, do you want to take the meeting back to go to public comment, or do you want?
Fantastic. Well, Councilmember Zulik, one last comment. Oh, you guys. Okay, final round of comments. You all have 1 minute.
Well, do we want to have public comment first and then final round
Okay, yeah.
of
Let's do
comments?
public comment first, and then we can all have a sort of closing comment,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap up the meeting. So, public comment, Mr. MG, we'd love to hear from you. Anybody else who'd like to? Anybody else, whether you're online or in council chambers, if you'd like to make public comment, same rules as normal, 3 minutes. If you'd like to state your name, that would be wonderful. Are there folks online?
Yes, there are.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start here with Mr. MG.
Thank you, Mr. President. Christopher MG from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, a 904 membership organization, 80% of those local. I'm just looking at my notes, and we talked a lot about assets. And how I sort of saw it, what are those assets? Some of them are very transportation-based with the sidewalks, the Indiana project's been brought up. Others are more economic development. I often talk about baseball fields. Frank Southern, we just had a pneumonia spill. Those are things that sort of bring in sort of tourists and have economic vitality. That also includes the arts. We have the Waldron and the Buskirk. And then there's more community ones, such as the Banneker Center and Allison Jukebox. So it's very hard to sort of put all of those into one umbrella or the term bucket, which I don't like. When we talked about homeless, I think one of the things that if the council was sort of centered on is what can we do, what can we fund that can save money down the road? These are investments. It's the ounce of prevention. So what can we do to maybe save money on businesses for cleanup costs coming from needles and other trash? So we got to sort of look at it with that lens in mind. And then a little bit on the social service end, we didn't mention it I don't think tonight, but the Jack Hopkins. That's very social service, and you mentioned in conversations about getting more focus there, maybe increasing that funding and getting some very social service, maybe less projects and maybe a little bit bigger from one of our providers that sort of looks into that. Cost to move, I liked Councilmember Zasari on that. What is that going to cost? I mean, a lot of these things that I think the council claims it can control, it doesn't really have quite the resources to start really handing out the type of checks, especially in this economic environment, SB 1, that I think that would allow for that. So we got to make sure we're sort of investing that money wisely in the city, and then also looking at in the opposite of what can we cut, or what assets do we not need. So it's something to look at there. And then we talked about plans. I'll leave you with what I scribbled. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And I think that sums up tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone online who would like to make a comment?
Yes, we have 2 hands are up.
Fantastic. First person, you'll be unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Kevin Keogh.
Hey, Kevin.
Good evening. For the past several months,
The timer.
my public comments have focused on the symptom of our city's late publication of the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, the ACFR, along with questions about when it's due and are there any consequences to late publications of the ACFR. Today, I'm here to address the underlying condition. I'm moving beyond the topic of simple timeliness to the critical legal requirements of the single audit report and our contractual bond covenants. Also, the need to strengthen our local government's administrative processes and much needed improvement with internal controls. In my recent email inquiries to the State Board of Accounts and responses from Beth Kelly, the Deputy State Examiner of State of Indiana Board of Public Accounts, she was unequivocal. The September 30th deadline is not a suggestion. It is a federal regulation mandate under the Uniform Guidance. This deadline exists to ensure the timely submission of the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting. We must be accurate and public must know about what that report states. For the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023, our independent auditors identified a material weakness regarding internal controls over federal grant compliance. Excuse me. A material weakness is the highest level of an internal control audit concern, indicating a reasonable possibility that material noncompliance will not be prevented or detected. To date, this council has not publicly deliberated these findings or the required remediation. Beyond federal grants, the city has a contractual obligation to our bondholders. Deputy State Examiner Kelly highlighted the timing of our financial report is often dictated by the continuing disclosure obligations unique to our bond documents. These are legal contracts. When we fail to provide audited financials within the terms of these bond contracts, it is my understanding this may risk triggering events of default, or the city may be forced to file notice of failure on the national EMA system. This could damage the city's credit reputation and potentially increase the interest rates Bloomington taxpayers must pay for financing future bridges, roads, or housing projects. The 2027 priority ask. As you develop the 2027 budget priorities, I formally request 3 actions. That the audit remediation and internal control strengthening be prioritized as a foundational governance goal. Basically, improve our processes, meet the June 30th date to publish the ACFR and the related audit reports. The council refer to the 2023 single audit findings to the fiscal committee for a public briefing to disclose how these material weaknesses are being corrected and provide adequate transparency. That the council include public deliberations of all future ACFRs and single audit reports, along with public discussion of the findings and/or requirements remediation reports. Make transparency a part of the process. If the city cannot master the basic processes of adequate systems between
And that's your time.
That's it, though. My time's up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there somebody else online?
Yes, we do have one more person.
Thank you. You can be unmuted and look forward to hearing your comments.
Hi, folks. This is Paul Russo. I don't have much to say. Mostly I wanted to thank you for acknowledging that the transportation system is inequitable. I live that every day, and it was nice to hear. And other than that, hope you have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Russo. Is there anybody else online?
No hands up at this point.
Okay, well, thank you all for your public comment. Anybody else in the room? Okay, all right, well, we'll come back then to council members. Would be awesome if you have any sort of closing remarks, and we'll start with Councilmember Rallo.
Well, I hate to be a wet blanket, but I wanted to ask a question about, Councilmember Strasburg attended It Takes a Village Forum a couple months ago about the SEA 1 and its effect on revenue, and is the administration still expecting a $30 million reduced revenue over the next couple of years?
We don't have good detailed estimates yet. That the deadline or the date that the new income tax system will be implemented was pushed out to 2029 in the latest General Assembly session. It was originally 2028, so we have kind of a year reprieve. But there is no good solid information yet on how much the city-specific local income tax would be able to raise. And that's really the mystery. So we are going to be working with Reedy to just improve our estimates and figure out, how much that $10 million was kind of a very high-level sort of lobbyists' estimate using some pretty high-level metrics. We need something much more detailed, which is really a kind of a detailed assessment of actual income by resident or by household.
So it's to be determined.
Yes.
So stay tuned. And
it is almost certain that the options we have available to us now will not adequately replace the income of the current system.
okay.
So we just don't know by how much yet.
And my other question would be, we've gone through process deliberation of these priorities for quite a long time, and I think they're still very useful insofar as even if we can't apply more funding, they still provide directions. They could be useful in determining baselines, maybe even efficiencies.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Rallo. Councilmember Strasburg? Any last comments, thoughts?
Sure. I guess the comment that I will make is just to thank you all for your feedback, and I will do my best to create a new survey and then use that survey to create a letter. And I'm going to do that as soon as I can, with the acknowledgement that I'm actually leaving town on Saturday morning at about 4 in the morning. Yeah, it may be a fun couple of days, but try to look for that, and as soon as you get that, do your best to respond to it, because I originally really wanted to bring this letter to y'all for approval at our next regular session on the 25th. So I want to have at least a draft that then, if it needs to be modified again, then we can get it approved at the next regular session after that on the first week of April, because of course the administration is working on this, now, and so especially if part of what we're asking is kind of some of those categories, and if part of what Controller McKim is telling us is in last year in terms of that non-specific kind of presentations, it was partly because of the outcome-based budgeting shift and realizing the vast number of outcomes and categorizing. And so if there's a limited number of things that we can say, hey, we really want you to track and categorize these things, then that will help them moving forward. So that's the timeline goal, the very last day that I would want to get something approved to send to the administration would be that first meeting in April. So that's maybe a little aspirational, but just please watch your emails, watch your texts, and respond to that as soon as you can. Thanks.
Three brief things. One, I'll continue with the committee to try to do work to identify best practices and think about systems level improvements to this to keep this moving in a better trajectory. because yeah, there's a limit to what we can do with what we have. Second, really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, especially from Councilmember Stossberg, so thank you, and Councilmember Piedmont Smith maybe before you. Third is that just my view and experience, I guess, over the last 6 years is that often we have pretty good alignment on stated values and priorities, and where we have a hard time is in the details and the implementation. And I think that will remain true. So I think this is progress. I think it's important, but I think being able to get into the details and see them in budget presentations and being able to talk about them at that level is like where we're actually going to find the meaningful tensions in different perspectives about how we're going to achieve these things, that kind of thing. So I think we'll see that, and yeah, we should anticipate that. That's all. Thanks.
I found this to be productive. All I'll say to conclude is thank you to Controller McKim for joining us and spending the evening with us. And thank you. And thank you to Councilmember Stossberg for putting this all together, and all of my lovely colleagues for such a great discussion.
Thank you.
Just to give a quick thank you to the Fiscal Committee for all the hard work that you've done, and especially Councilmember Stossberg. I know that was like, creating algorithms for, Don't tell us that. Yeah, we'll give you more.
She said it was fun.
It was fun.
No, and
it was fun in kind of a hard way, but it really, it's like a crossword
one of those
puzzle.
fun
Like it's fun in a
challenges.
hard way.
It keeps your brain young.
That's right.
Yeah. No, and I think it's really valuable to have these conversations, like even just for me, clarifying, not only to see where everybody's at, but where the city's at and what we're all thinking. And thank you very much, Controller McKim, for joining us.
I wasn't going to say anything after my waffles comment, but I do want to
That was
say
the mic drop.
thank you to the Fiscal Committee and Councilmember Stossberg, and thanks for all the reminders via email and text. I think it will go okay. I just want to make sure the overarching theme sort of is to do our plans, do our plans. And in a way, I mean, maybe it's just way too hard of an ask, but I just wish we could be like, here are all the numbered goals in our plans, and like, here are the dots of which outcome hits on which goal, kind of. I mean, like Scantron, oh my gosh, or something like that. I don't know, but I think that the departments that have pieces of our plans and goals, I think they should like intimately know the numbers and where we should be going. And so I guess I think I would like it to be more of a common practice that our staff can talk to us, or the city staff can talk and say, like, this is Climate Action Plan 6.2.8. I would love it. I would really geek out on that. So I don't know to what extent that's possible, but it would be useful for me too in the budget process.
Check. I was going to thank Councilmember Stossberg too for all the effort, time, and thinking she obviously put into this. But since it was fun, her
Do it again.
and she's about ready to go have fun on her spring break on Saturday morning. It sounds like. I just want to say one thing. It's a small thing, but I think it's important, and it's consistent with this idea when we spoke earlier about the use of the term maintenance or maintain city assets. Sort of frames that, the words we use, the way we say it, and also related to the idea that we have plans that we've adopted, and we need to adhere to those and be consistent as we possibly can. And so I would just like to ask in future surveys and in the wording of the letter that we are consistent with what we said in our fundamental guiding plan for the city, the comprehensive plan, where we've acknowledged that population growth on its own is not something we seek. We don't seek just to grow for the sake of growing. And so when we frame something like we want to see GDP or outpace or income outpace population, it sort of it creates, at least in my mind, an image that we're sort of endorsing both in some kind of race and we want one to move ahead of the other. Instead, say it more like we want to see income growth. We want to see GDP increase relative to population, regardless of what population does, and we're not using them in the same way. That income per capita, or median income growth, we're going to assume is fundamentally good for the community. But we've already said in our guiding documents that we don't seek just population growth. So just in the wording, don't link the two in a way that suggests an endorsement of just for the sake of growing, except when we're talking about well-being of the community in terms of access to amenities, equity, different types of equity, and income, things like that, which we are going to assume are good to grow. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for a robust conversation. Also, 3 quick points. Thing number 1, thank you, Councilmember Strasburg, for putting this all together and for putting the next one together. For these deliberation sessions, I know Councilmember Flaherty said that he wanted us to do one. Councilmember Daley is the sort of liaising with making sure that they all get done. So just communicate with Councilmember Daley so we can get those scheduled. Really grateful for the robust conversation that we've had, and I think sort of echoing what Councilmember Flaherty said, it would be wonderful if in the middle of our budget presentation, after we get the presentations, that we could have a conversation like this where we can talk about the minutia of the broader things, because I think when we're talking in this setting, we're able to go back and forth in a more fluid way. I think sometimes that we always end up a bit better than the sum of our parts. So a lot of things I hadn't thought about until we started talking here that was just really helpful. So. And then the only other thought is whether we want to rather do a resolution than a letter. Same effect, I think, at the end of the day, but might allow for public comment. Which might, help galvanize a little bit more support and awareness around the council's ideas, and so we can also then have a clear vote on, all of us said this unanimously in this order or something like that. So, just food for thought there. Thank you all. If there's no objections, we are adjourned.